Hello, and once again, thank you very much for all your feedback and memories of the Newry stage and beyond. And thanks to the feedback from members of other musical and theatrical societies. And hello to those watching in the kitchen of South Bend, Indiana, who were transported back to the Newry Arts Centre Auditorium on Friday evenings in 1990 during the conversation with Leo Reynolds. And Leo's asked me to say a big thank you to everyone for your kind comments following our chat. My guest today lives for musical theatre. So much of his life has been given to directing and performing in shows. As a teacher, vice principal and principal of Kilkeel High School, he brought musical stories to the Mournes, directing 42 school shows in an unbroken run of inspiration and creativity. In one Newry Musical Society programme, the pen note captures his vigorous enthusiasm as a versatile member of the society. His musical journey began on the Downshire Road in Newry, in conversation with David Cunningham.
That would have been when I was a pupil at Newry Grammar School, the old grammar school there on the Downshire Road. And when I was in sixth year, the school decided to put on an operetta, as they called it. Bobby Cooper was the instigation of it. HMS Pinafore, the old Gilbert and Sullivan. And that went on in the town hall. And I remember playing the part of the captain of the Pinafore. So that really was where it started.
And was there music in your family before that, or were you sort of first generation to get involved in musical theatre?
My father would have been very musical, but I'm probably the first generation to get involved. And certainly when I see the grandchildren and hear the grandchildren at the moment, I think there's hope for the future as well.
Well, you've given so many people the opportunity to experience musical theatre. When you went through school and after grammar school, you went on to study in Queens. Was there any music and any theatre work through that couple of years?
Not really, because I was one of those very boring people who came home at the weekends. And when you came home at the weekends, that meant you had to work the other 4 nights in the week.
What was the first musical society show you were in, David?
It was Showboat, 1971. The director was a professional from, I think, England, Chris Fox. And everyone was very excited that this professional had come along to Newry to direct Showboat.
You obviously got the love of the stage and the love of performance. And that moment when you were on stage with the Musical Society and the curtain came down, an anticlimax then, a searching for what to do next?
Well, very much so, particularly the week afterwards. It was a dreadful week, coming down from a high, very, very difficult to cope with. But at the same time, you were glad of the rest. Though I suppose in those days, you didn't have to rest as much as I would have to rest now.
And then you got involved with helping out with the productions, David. How did you move from that sort of on-stage role into helping out? In fact, at stages, you were both on stage and helping out in the production.
Charlie Smith introduced Newry Musical to Ray Jeffrey, the famous Englishman. He came along to direct. His first show with Newry was South Pacific in 1974. And I can tell you it was a wake-up call, because instead of standing in lines and singing, we suddenly had to move around the stage, sometimes fast pace, because there was a move nearly on every single beat. And when Ray was here, he would have come for, say, a week or 2 weeks. He would have set part of the production, and then he would have handed over to an assistant as such to rehearse that until he came back maybe 4 or 6 weeks later. That's the way he worked. He had different assistants for his first 2 or 3 years. I can remember Kathleen Bell assisted him in one particular production. I was asked at the beginning of 1977 if I would be his assistant. And, if I'd thought about it maybe more closely, I perhaps would have said no. But at the same time, of course, it was Musical Society, and you said yes, especially when you had people like Charlie and Wesley and, you know, folk like that, you know,
encouraging you gently.
Very gently, yes. So 1977 was my first assistant to the producer, and I can assure you it was a baptism of fire. When I think back to the cast, you know, those folk who were drama and musical, they were the very top, people like Ray Spallon, Margaret Nolan, Ethel Fitzpatrick, Kathleen Bell, they were all in that production. And when I think back now, I had some cheek, you know, taking over from Ray Jeffrey and trying to direct people like that.
I remember seeing that production, and the first production I saw with the Musical Society, I think, was the year before. I think it was Oklahoma. Would that be right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I would call Oklahoma the rebirth of the society.
Mm-hmm.
The very early 70s were difficult times, as you know, in the country. And in 1972, we didn't have a show as such. We had a concert over in the Tech.
Yeah.
And the second half of that concert was excerpts from Oklahoma. And then we decided we would do the full show, Oklahoma 1973. And Kathleen directed that show. And Ethel Fitzpatrick played Aunt Eller. I can remember it so well. But on our first night, now there must have been something that happened to the town hall, I think, in that year.
I remember seeing it in the parochial hall.
The parochial hall, and it was wonderful because the curtain flew up and down. It was a wonderful place. And on the very first night, Wesley was playing the part of Curly. Wesley had to come from the back of the stage in a semicircle down to the front as the curtain was lifting. Oh, what a beautiful morning. Very first night, the curtain started moving up and then stopped. And could not get that curtain to move. We had to apologize to the audience and say we would start again in 10 minutes. So 10 minutes, it had been taken off the thing. It was then going to be opened properly, and the show started. Now, first nights, days, we would have had all the folks from the surrounding homes would have been in the audience, you know.
Yeah.
And we started Act 2, and we were in the middle of the farmer and the cowman, when the next thing, Charlie Smith, who was the chairman, then walked to the front of the stage, stopped everything, apologized to everyone, and said that we had just received a bomb scare and that unfortunately we had to vacate the building. So we jumped off the stage. We helped the older folk out onto the street. I think we must have been out in the street for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I'm not so sure. And the next thing we decided, right, Charlie said, okay, all clear. We went back in again. We started Act 2 again, and we had a most enjoyable Act 2. But such a first night, I tell you, it was one of the most traumatic experiences of my life.
I'm sure that the notion of that curtain halfway up, you could see dancing feet, and that was all.
Wesley's legs from the knees down. Oh, what a beautiful morning.
But there must have been other moments like that on the journey through all of those shows, David, that it didn't go quite as well or quite as it was planned.
But I can always remember we had a fabulous dolly in Newry, and it played very well to capacity audiences. Margaret Nolan was dolly, actually. Gust, of course, was conducting, and Ray had directed. It was a good show. And we were rehearsing. In those days, you rehearsed for Bangor as well as for Waterford Festival.
That's right.
And
yes.
the Bangor had happened in May, just before our week in Newry. And then we were getting ready for September. Now, Ray never came back. It was my job to get it ready for Waterford. So we were buzzing. We had a good show. The dancing was good. The colour was good. The costumes were marvellous. And we set off for Waterford. Oh, very, very high hopes. And I don't know what happened, but from the moment the orchestra started at the overture, the whole thing slowed away down. Some of the notes we didn't recognize. The curtain opened. I can remember the first dance number, something happened to it. I think it was Gladys dropped her umbrella. Now, Gladys would never drop her umbrella, but down it went. Then I think it was Act 3, the backstage staff got a bit confused and started setting up scene 5. And I can remember the girls were to go off stage right, you know, in a semi off to the right. Suddenly there was a flat blocking their exit. So I just shouted, go around again. So they went back out again and went off that way. Well, then from that moment on, the whole show fell apart. One of our biggest disasters in front of an international audience.
But that might have been a low in Waterford, David, but there were some highs in Waterford as well to come home with the international trophy.
Yeah, absolutely. We came home with the international trophy in 1976, Desert Song. 1977, My Fair Lady was pipped at the post by 1 point. A group from London won it that year with a 2-act, Gilbert and Sullivan. 78 was Gypsy Baron, which came third. And then we struck gold again. I'll never forget it, in 79 with Fiddler on the Roof. Marvelous show. Wonderful show. Such soul, honestly. Beautiful show.
So many people have great memories of it, of the powerful performances, of the principals, how every member of the cast actually had a name. They were a person, they were a family, how Ray took everyone through that as well and gave everyone a sense of what it meant and all of the symbolisms within the show as well. Do you remember that show? Ray had it so that could have been to avoid an embarrassment, but Ray had it set that when the audience was coming in, the curtains were open and the fiddler was on the roof.
Right. Yeah.
And that lasted one night. But more than that, the fiddler and the fiddle that the fiddler had. Do you remember what happened the first night? You maybe weren't aware of this.
No, maybe not. Tell me.
It was either the first night or the second night. The fiddle had been a borrowed fiddle, and Donald Fagan was the fiddler who was to be on the roof. And out the back of the minor hall, there's a door at the back of the minor hall, takes you to the stairs down to the dressing rooms. And there's a window ledge there, and there's one of those old iron radiators. And people used to congregate there because you were down getting your costumes on, you came up and you were there, you were safe enough, you couldn't be heard. And I was sitting on the old iron radiator, and either I get pushed back or something happened in a shuffle, but I slid back off it onto the window ledge and there was a crack. And in a plastic bag on the window ledge was the fiddle for the fiddler on the roof.
Oh my goodness.
And it went crack, and is it the neck of the violin, whatever your fiddle, whatever you call that, got snapped away from the body. The bag was opened, and I think it had been a borrowed one, but hopefully the owner of it may not hear this. But to the rescue came Jimmy, and I think it was particularly Joe, and he strapped it up and glued it up together. But that was a nervous moment. And the other thing, there's so many things about that show that I can remember. One of the things I remember was Ray Jeffrey obviously directed it, but Ray also took on the task of creating beards for each of the folk through Newry who hadn't it, and it was like a copy decks type thing he applied, and then he built the beard and you peeled it off. Well, that was grand for the nights before, and I came to put it on, and by the time I'd put it on with copy decks, it looked like I'd stuck a dead mouse onto the bottom of my chin. It no more looked like a beard than something you'd see cast away in the corner. He wasn't a happy bunny with that either. He wasn't a happy bunny with that. But you must have been so proud of that as a production.
Oh, I love that show. I remember carrying the international trophy over from the theatre over to the Tower Hotel in fear and trepidation that it would slip and fall, but yes, and remember that so well. I really do. So
many shows. We could talk all night about all the shows with the Musical Society. Is there a favorite that you have?
I think in the old days I would have loved My Fair Lady, still do. Oklahoma, yes. I can remember a marvelous production of Gigi with a very young Veronica Devine playing the leading role. I think her baptism, no, I think she was in Ireland the year before, and then she was Gigi, marvelous performer. Fiddler, I love, of course, I do love it. But I've come now to enjoy very much some of the more modern shows. You know, I enjoyed Hairspray when I did it in school, and I love Joseph, of course, and I love Superstar, absolutely, you know. And Les Miserables, my last show in school, the 42nd show was Les Miserables.
Yeah.
And oh, such a thrill to even do it. And we just, you know, some years more than other years, you were blessed with wonderful talent. It's the same in the Musical Society. And we just had a great collection of boys and girls that year. And I can remember we were so pleased with it that we took it to the theatre in Lisburn. We had performed in the Mac Theatre for our 40th anniversary. We wanted to do it again. We couldn't get the Mac. So we went, is it the Island Theatre, I think, in Lisburn?
Yeah.
We Les Mis there. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful farewell to school shows.
Let's talk about the school shows. Your first show in the school, 1973, HMS Pinafore.
That's right. That's the only show really I know an awful lot about in those days.
Well, start with a good foundation, you know, and obviously it was a very strong foundation, because unlike some other schools that did school shows alternate years, I mean, I think 73 through until what, 2014, a show practically every year. Was it every year? Were there any gaps?
Every year, yeah.
And that's brilliant, because you were given an opportunity. There wasn't a year group was going to miss out on that opportunity.
No, that's right.
And was that a deliberate thought on your behalf as a director, and then as the principal, to maintain that tradition of every year?
Not really, Declan. It just happened. People enjoyed it. The youngsters enjoyed participating. The folk enjoyed coming. Like, we had 4 nights full, you know, capacity audiences. Of course, you will have that in the school show anyway. But no, it just went on and on and on. And, you know, I started off, I was head of English, and the next thing I was vice principal, trying to cope with it as well. And then the next thing I was principal, trying to cope, you know, as director. But, you know, kids were good, and we had built up a tradition. You know, we had built up a tradition, therefore we kept to it. Yeah. And we would have started, that has taught the music in September. We would have started staging maybe mid to late October, and then we were always on the second week of December.
Yeah.
And that was the end of the term.
The school show, David, too, has such an important part to play in the school, because you've got teamwork, you've got confidence, you've got all of those things, those life skills that people can learn in a very short space of time, very concentrated space of time, but so important that is kept on. It's more than a musical, isn't it?
Absolutely. There were so many skills learned by appearing on stage. There's no doubt about it. You mentioned there, especially teamwork. We all had to work together on stage. We had to work with the lights. We had to work with the staging. We had to work with costumes, makeup, everything. It's the same in the Musical Society. If you have one weak area, it weakens your show. And the big successes would always have been both in Kilkeel and in Newry, when everybody was working together. We were all giving 100%, all on the same night, and everything clicked.
But the teams you worked with in Newry, David, because I remember when you were saying, you know, being assistant to Ray, and the times that I was in rehearsals for Fiddler and other shows, the amount of annotation and notes that you and Sheila and everybody else was taking when he was there was incredible. You know, pages were being turned, notes were being taken, because you had to remember everything for everybody, because you're guaranteed that those of us in rehearsals, it was pretty transient. You know, by the time it come to the next night, we had forgotten about it, because there'd been a day's work or a day's study in between. You know, somebody had to write it down.
Notebooks after notebooks after notebooks. I still have some of them. Looking at them now, I can't even read my own writing. How on earth I ever rehearsed some of the, you know. And then when Ray would go, everybody had an opinion about what way he did it. You know, by the end of the day, I had to say, I'm sorry, folks, that may be so, but this is the way we're doing it. If it's not right, when he comes back, I'll take the flak.
It's more than an annual cycle for you. You must really enjoy it.
Absolutely. I absolutely love it. Even now, at my age, I just love it. I live for it every year. And the lovely thing at the moment is we have a very talented cast again. We've had a lot of new blood, new young blood. And one of the biggest thrills over the last few years, of course, was the Superstar. And it won so many different awards. You know, it was best musical, best staging, you know what I mean? And that was everything. They won the NODA award there a couple of years ago. Wonderful. And I can remember thinking we went straight out of Superstar in the March to doing Joseph in October. Meanwhile, we also staged the memorial tribute to Wesley. Then we had the Joseph in October, and then we were straight into Footloose. And Footloose, of course, closed the town hall last March. Yeah. We were the last performance in the town hall before lockdown. We were very fortunate to have got through that week.
Newry Musical, and like many other groups, have brought productions to the people of the town and the surrounding areas that they may not have got an opportunity to go and see in Belfast or Dublin or over to London. And the same with yourself in Kilkeel. You were bringing high value productions onto the stage in Kilkeel, giving an opportunity for audiences and people in Kilkeel to see something they would never see otherwise. And
that's true.
School then, probably that sort of inspirational role as well. You brought some of the students over to London to experience shows in London.
Absolutely. Every year I organised the third years. The third years went to London, Holy Week. We did that for 40 years, one year after the other. And we always went to the theatre one evening. And I can remember seeing an Oklahoma with Hugh Jackman playing the part of Curly and Maureen Lipman playing Aunt Eller. Absolutely brilliant. The youngsters loved it, of course. I can remember taking some seniors to see Phantom of the Opera. For goodness sake, they just came out in the interval. They were so excited and so high. I thought we'd never get them back in again for the second half. You know, things like that. Oh, wonderful times, wonderful times.
And you were probably being very clever as well, because you were taking the third years along, but when you came back to the school shows were more or less wrapped around the senior years. So you were inspiring them to get involved, and you saw what it could be
right.
like.
That's right, because that was April time, say, and then by September they were fourth years. So they were eligible to appear on stage. And, you know, one carried through to the other, no doubt about that.
Well, David, you know, 42 musicals with just the school under your belt is incredible. And layer on top of that all the productions with the Musical Society as well. And I think when you retired from school, you got you didn't get a watch, you didn't get a clock, you got a very unique memento to remind you of all those 42 productions.
Where on earth did you hear that? Yes, I got a canteen of cutlery, and each piece has the name of the show and the year we performed it.
Isn't that brilliant?
It was absolutely brilliant, yeah. Lovely, lovely present.
That must have been an emotional night for you when you had that sort of tribute night and you handing over the notebook to somebody else.
Oh, yes, it was. Well, they have continued the tradition, maybe not every year, but certainly it has continued. But no, certain things are almost inscribed in your mind now, written into your mind. You will never forget, and I'll never forget that night.
2015, and the school website described it as a musical extravaganza in recognition of Mr. W. Cunningham's contribution to the previous 42 musicals in Kilkeel High School.
You've done your homework.
35 years in the BBC, you learn to do your research.
Oh, very good, very good.
David, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you and to share those memories with you. And you know, there's probably a part 2 to this. We can dig into some of the other shows and some of the stories that remain untold. But coming out of lockdown, if there was one show that you had to pick to either produce, direct or just sit in the front row and enjoy, what would that be?
Mamma Mia.
Have we got the cast for Mamma Mia?
We'd find them.
Well, listen, David, thank you very much for sharing your memories with me. And thank you very much, for 42 shows in Kilkeel High School, for I don't know how many shows with Newry Musical, stretching back to the first year the man walked on the moon in 1969. You stepped on the stage with Newry Musical Society. It's been an incredible giving that you've made for the musical theatre and musical societies in Newry and Kilkeel. Thank you so much for that. And maybe Mamma Mia might be on the agenda for the next meeting.